Hello, everyone. Welcome to this CDP Masterclass webinar co-hosted by Zeotap with our special guests at Silverbullet. My name's Hannah. I'm going to be moderating today. I'm just going to give us about 30 seconds of awkward silence while we wait for more people to get started, and then we will kick off. All right, awkward silence over. I'm sure we're all relieved. Welcome to everyone joining today. Thank you so much for joining us. We are going to be together for the next 40 minutes or so, talking all things CDP. So first things first, hello, to introduce myself. I'm Hannah. I'm the VP of Marketing at Zeotap, and I'm very pleased to be joined today by our two speakers. So from Zeotap, our founder and CPO, Prajol, and from Silverbullet, Sandy, Managing Director. You will hear from both of those two very shortly themselves. But before we get to them, just a quick recap on what's coming up today. We have quite a lot of things, so brace yourselves. We are first going to be discussing what is a CDP. We'll start from the absolute basics. But also, very importantly, we're going to discuss what is not a CDP, and we'll unpack why that question is important very soon. And then, of course, when you need a CDP, or when you don't. And fourthly, those top considerations for choosing one. Now, we're going to cover quite a lot of ground in this discussion, but of course, I'm sure there will be more. So here's the important part. We will be taking your questions once that discussion is done. So that leads me on to some key housekeeping points for today. So first of all, those questions. Over on the tab on the right-hand side of your screen, I don't know if it's pointing in the right direction, if I'm doing that, or whether it's mirrored. You are going to see a couple of tabs. One of those is labeled questions, and that's where we would love for you to submit your questions throughout the course of today's discussion to our speakers. Anything and everything about CDPs, if you want to know, they can answer them. And we'll take as many questions as we can in the 10 minutes towards the end, so make sure that you get in early. Next is, if you have any technical issues or other questions about today's event, you've got a chat tab there as well. So please submit our questions and one of our team will help you out as soon as possible. Hopefully you won't need to. Third thing, this webinar is 90% visual free. So even though you can see our beautiful faces, we're not going to have too many slides here today for you to have to follow along with. So if you're multitasking, this is designed for you. But fourth, we also have a poll today. Again, over on the right-hand side of your screen, you're going to see a poll tab with a little question for you, and we would love to hear your answers. So please do submit your responses as we go, and we'll probably have a look at the results at the end. And then, of course, the recording of this will be sent afterwards, so make sure you check your email after this event has happened. It will all be there for you to recap on and also to share if you found it useful. So all of that being done, it's a little bit of time now to think about who we are today. So first, let's introduce our guests at Silverbullet. Sandy, I'm going to hand over to you for you to tell us more.
Thank you, Hannah. Good morning all, or good afternoon all, depending on where you are actually dialing in from. Hi, I'm Sandy Gooman, MD of Silverbullet, a products and services business. And we really help businesses and our clients to unlock the full potential of their data and technology to drive return on investment. Built with marketing in mind, our best-in-class services team, they actually solve for the biggest challenges that clients, brands, advertisers, agencies are facing today and also tomorrow, encompassing first-party data strategy development, advising on customer journey, activation and orchestration, advising on ad tech and martech transformations, and truly supporting them to leverage data and technology. And really it is all about reaching the consumer at the right time, at the right place. And along with that, measuring performance and generating insights. What really makes us different is that we actually sit at the heart of everything. We work with agencies, empowering them to drive value from their clients and their data sets. We work with consultancies, often as subject matter experts. We work with vendors, recommending the right tech to our customers. And we work with system integrators, connecting the dots across the data sources with the right integrations. So we really are living and breathing our philosophy around delivering leading products and services to truly reduce the friction across the digital ecosystem, from data management right through to business outcomes. And we're pretty proud of the people and the skills that we've actually acquired and gelled together to be the DNA of the business. And we have a global scale, both in terms of the clients that we actually service on a global and a local level, but also the presence across a number of different regions with boots on the ground across Europe, UK, Italy, Germany, along with Australia and the US. We're not actually specialists in any particular industry or vertical. We work across numerous verticals: CPG, broadcasters, gaming, luxury, hospitality, example. But actually, we're also absolutely helping broadcasters transition from linear TV to digital ad spend, and informing how broadcasters are actually engaging with their consumers, for instance. So we're pretty strong in broadcast as well. And actually, on the other hand, we're also helping the world consume more alcohol. But ultimately, our specialism lies in breaking down those data silos and technology, and removing that friction, delivering the right message to the right consumer at the right time. I'm going to now hand over to Prajol, who will talk a little bit about Zeotap.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today, and special thanks to Sandy and the Silverbullet team for making time for us and sharing their expertise. Zeotap, I happen to be the founder and chief product officer. We are a customer data platform made in and for Europe. We help clients do more and better to really harness the power of their first-party data. So that starts with unifying their data across multiple silos, ranging from offline to online sources across owned and operated and other data stores and inventory. And then really enhancing that data by mapping it to a common catalog, enriching it to the extent necessary, trying to derive patterns within that data. We specialize in the area of governance, risk, and compliance to ensure that every aspect of that first-party data asset is compliant across different types of consent requirements and user preferences. And then, of course, the value comes in the last piece of it, which is the last mile activation across different types of platforms and channels, ranging from the paid platforms for paid media, social media, owned and operated inventory, as well as platforms such as the marketing automation systems and other MarTech tools. More recently, we've seen use cases where clients choose to activate their first-party data on customer success or customer service solutions, for example, so that their customer success teams have a very similar view as their marketers. So I think the scope is growing as marketers and other stakeholders discover new use cases for CDPs. We are fortunate to count some of the world's largest brands as our clients. As with Silverbullet, we tend to be quite sector agnostic. What's important for us is that we can help clients derive value from our platform. And most recently, we have been honored to be recognized by Gartner, by G2, by Ad Exchanger, and the CDP Institute as one of the leaders in the space.
All right, thank you both very much. Now the bragging portion of today's proceedings is over. Let's get to our discussion, and we're going to start with a very big question. So one of the reasons that I think we're all here today and why so many people are dialed in is because CDPs are the latest buzzword in MarTech, and everyone claims to have one, or everyone claims to be one. So the definitions of what a CDP is seem kind of blurry. So Sandy, I'd like to come to you first on this. According to you, what is a CDP exactly?
Thanks, Hannah. And I think before we dive right into what a CDP is, I think it's really useful to take a step back and also consider how the marketing landscape has actually evolved over the years. I mean, there's been plenty of disruption. If we think about customers being increasingly concerned about how their data is being used online. In fact, really interestingly, I was actually talking to one of our clients yesterday, and it was very interesting to hear that the general feeling seems to be that consumers are actually now just as scared of privacy and what is done with their data as they actually are scared of COVID. Now that's something. And if we couple that with the deprecation of the cookie, the government legislation and the privacy features, it's becoming harder and harder to track, share and activate users across different marketing platforms. And the ability to really leverage the data and the cookies whilst adhering to the ever-changing regulations is becoming more complex and complicated than ever. And then in that, if we actually throw in the complexity of the ad tech landscape into the mix, often fragmented and difficult to navigate, it's no surprise that the market is in need of some solutions that can easily join the dots whilst adhering to privacy regulations and not compromising on scale. But it's not all doom and gloom. The evolving marketing landscape is an opportunity for many businesses to take that step back to plan for the future. So it really is that opportunity for businesses to minimize the limitations in their capabilities once the cookie goes. So many are actually building for a future with increased focus on that first party data approach. And many are actually reassessing and reframing how they're actually storing customer data, how they're connecting the different data sources, how they're activating their data with relevant content and context along the way. Actually also how they're actually generating the insights and measuring performance, all in a privacy safe environment. So businesses are actually transforming, and they're actually driven by data, and they're wanting to become increasingly automated and accountable and really understand where the audience is and really place the emphasis on that audience, underpinning the customer, then underpinning all of this being the driving force for marketing. So customer data has a key role to play in how many businesses are now engaging with their consumers and their clients. And this really is the evolution of the CDP. A CDP actually pulls together PII data that may be held across different systems, whether it be CRM or whether it be transactional. And it really is about breaking down those data silos to provide that single customer view. And the collected data comes from different sources. It ties back to customer records and identifiers, for example, email addresses or phone numbers, to really provide that richer view of customer profiles as well. And then what the CDP really enables one to do is to be able to slice and dice those profiles and build them into segments, which can then be connected to owned and paid third-party channels to really deliver some of those customer experiences, targeted marketing and advertising. So to some, this actually may sound similar to a DMP, but actually a CDP allows you to build high quality first-party data sets in a centralized hub and build those deterministic customer profiles that can actually be connected to the different tools across your tech stack. So it really does. So to me, the core of what a CDP is, it really does work with multiple sources of PII data, and it's a lot more customer centric. And Prajal, is there anything that you wanted to add on to that? I'd love your viewpoint on that too.
So Sandy, I think that was a very comprehensive definition. There's not much to add. Maybe the one thing to recognize is that the space is still quite embryonic in many ways. And so as the requirements develop, we find platforms gravitating to the CDP label from different unique propositions. So there are the tag management solutions that are becoming more CDP-like. There are some data warehouses that are offering more CDP-like capabilities. There are some consent solutions that are also moving into the space, and these are sort of typically upstream from a CDP. You also have solutions that sit downstream from a CDP, like a marketing automation solution that can claim some CDP-like capabilities. So I think it's quite a variegated space, but ultimately, as you said, the value lies in building that single unified view of the customer, being able to harness the power of integrating data across multiple silos and really reflecting the consent and user preferences to ensure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we've unpacked a lot in those last couple of minutes, but I think some of those key takeaways that I find particularly interesting is what has led us to this space in the first place. Sandy, you mentioned that the cookieless future is a really clear accelerant for that need to have that means of orchestrating your first party data, but the trend for CDPs actually began beyond that was before that was a concern. And I think that's where the consent and privacy part comes into this, of being able to understand and properly house all of that data in a way that's usable. So that segues onto our next question, I think. CDPs, hot topic. As I was saying before, everyone kind of claims to be one. So for you guys, and particularly for you, Sandy, you see so many different kinds of tools out in the markets. You're consulting on so many different things. Are there for you any red flags where you would say, this is not exactly a CDP. This is not exactly what it claims to be?
Yes, exactly. And I think, Prajal, you touched on a couple of those as well. Just, you mentioned automation tools, kind of enhancing some of their capabilities to become a CDP. An automation tool is an automation tool, but actually they can work very well with a CDP. So there's some of the considerations as well to think about. And CDPs, they're not custom integrations. They're actually built with marketing at the fore. And yes, there's many organizations that have their own CRM or separate CRM systems to store customer data, which absolutely is needed. But actually, the CDP contain different features, like pre-built marketing types of features, which enable marketeers to actually leverage the data and the signals that may be brought together in a CDP. So that really makes them powerful sales and marketing tools to enable that segmentation, to enable that data matching and the activation. They're also not, and we touched on tag management, they're not a glorified tag management platform. And there are many players that actually oversell themselves, claiming that they're a CDP when they may not fully be a CDP. And it is very much around some of those players, traditional players, re-engineering themselves or reinventing themselves, but actually, they may not be a true CDP. And I've already touched on CDPs and DMPs. There are some differences between a CDP and a DMP. Primarily, the DMPs were enabled to target cookies, for example, which many brands and advertisers have relied on for many years. But actually, the CDP creates that persistent customer profile, enabling it to store the data and combine it with other data points using PII data. So there's a number of things that a CDP isn't, but actually there are many organizations that are jumping onto the bandwagon, associating themselves to that CDP as well, because it's a buzzword.
Absolutely. More recently, I've noticed some CRMs extending their capabilities into CDP like features as well. And I think that it's important to recognize, Sandy, as you said, that the stakeholders are different. Much like the CRM is a system of record for sales, the CDP is almost a system of record for marketing. So it's of course, there are important elements of both that can work nicely in tandem, but they serve two distinct purposes. And to the extent that the CDP is sort of like a cockpit for the marketer, for the marketing function, if you extend that analogy, you cannot replace the cockpit with an engine or the wings or the rudder or the landing gear. They serve different purposes. The cockpit is the central hub, but you have different systems, platforms that are dedicated to certain tasks. The CDP just helps integrate and rationalize everything you're doing across these different platforms and build that central view. I think it's also important to recognize that the CDP is not just a dashboard, so it's not just a visualization. Much like the cockpit, again, it actually serves as an overarching management layer that powers these individual solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like, Prajal, what what you touched on there around CDP it is a marketing tool. It actually, to me, a CDP really enables marketers to be able to access insights and data to be able to activate against the data using the insights that are available. It really breaks down those silos where previously many marketers may have relied on data engineering teams to surface data or to be able to access data to build segments and target across different platforms, particularly in digital. So it really does connect the whole ecosystem together.
Thanks, guys. I think I'm just about to add a poll into this, just because I was very curious based off what you guys were talking about with regards to the CDP really being geared towards marketers and the kind of marketing use case here. So I'm just going to send a poll to everyone to find out of all of our lovely listeners, who's a marketer and who's not, so we can make sure we're gearing this conversation in the right way. So please let us know, guys. It will be good to get to know you all better. So I think then we're starting to establish what is and isn't a CDP, that there are some people out there that might be masquerading as one, but not quite meeting that idea of the single customer view that's so important, and not just the ability to create one, but action a single customer view as well. So now, having established what a CDP is, I'd like to move on to our next topic of what business challenges does a CDP solve? So, Sandy, I'm going to come to you first again with this question, which is arguably very similar to how long is a piece of string? But I imagine you see a lot of different challenges day to day that clients are trying to solve with a CDP. What are perhaps some of the most common ones that you see coming up?
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. And we've touched on, again, a number of these throughout the conversation so far. But ultimately, what businesses are really looking to do is to get that single customer view, to break down those data silos. We've all seen, or a number of us have seen across the different brands and advertisers, how data is sitting in different places, accessible to different teams. So it really is about breaking down the data silos, but also some of the organizational silos as well, which actually ultimately encourages more collaboration across the teams and the partners. So across the data teams, across the CRM teams, across marketing teams and activation teams as well. But in commercially, what businesses are really looking to solve is to drive those operational efficiencies. So operational efficiencies around onboarding and automating some of those data processes, and removing the dependency on some of the APIs and integrations, custom APIs and integrations, to then be able to serve them in different platforms. And actually efficiencies in terms of interrogating and segmenting and connecting audiences across different platforms as well. Whilst all at the same time, brands are also looking to be privacy safe and compliant, and which we've already discussed and touched on in quite a bit of detail, especially with consumers being a lot more aware on customer privacy and how their data is being used, but also with the demise of the cookie as well. So being privacy safe and compliant is absolutely key. And then along with that, CDPs, many brands are actually also looking to get more insight and then use that insight for marketing activation. So really driving those efficiencies to drive ROI from their marketing tactics. So whether that be informing the consumer and the marketing experiences with more targeted campaigns and personalized experiences across owned and paid channels, whether that be suppressing customers that they already have and not actually pissing them off, for example, with messaging on something that they've already paid for and already got. So driving acquisition as well. They also are looking to connect the different channels together. So campaigns are often being run in silos across digital, across CRM platforms like email, on-site personalization. So they're really looking to bring all of that together as well. So putting the customer front and center. And then once the CDPs are in place, customers are also really looking to be able to generate more reporting and insights, and being able to leverage modeling techniques, whether the modeling's done within a platform or outside of a platform and actually surfaced in the CDP. And that, to me, on a continual basis, really enables and facilitates profile enrichment. So continually understanding how the customers are behaving, how customers are actually engaging, and enriching those profiles to be able to deliver more real-time kinds of experiences and segmentation and activation. So to me, they're the main types of user cases that we're coming across working with our clients. And actually, some of the user cases that I've been involved in myself as an advertiser as well. Prajal, what is it? Anything different that you're seeing out there as well?
No, Sandy, in fact, I'm not sure this question is asked often enough, early enough in the CDP procurement process. And that's why we try and encourage our clients to start not with the solution, but rather with the problem. Because the single customer view should not be an end goal in and of itself. It should serve as a stepping stone to a lot of other wonderful business-centric commercial value that can be realized from having achieved it. And there, I think it really is horses for courses. Different businesses have different types of challenges. We work across different sectors. In the telecoms vertical, for example, churn is a major consideration. And therefore, the types of marketing strategies that are geared towards churn are very different from some of the newer D2C or retail verticals where the primary focus of the marketing team tends to be new customer acquisition. There are other cases where, for example, we find that working through the business challenges, one might realize that either the company or the client is not yet ready for a CDP, and that's something that we've discussed, Sandy, and we can talk to that in more detail. Or it could even be that it's too early and they don't really need a CDP yet, and that's fine too. I don't think we should foist a platform on a client just because it's in vogue, and there I think it's also important to recognize that the space is quite variegated. So depending on the business challenge, a different flavor of CDP might work better for a certain vertical or a certain client. But all things said and done, I think it's important to ask these questions first. What am I looking to achieve first? And what can I do quickly? Because the other major challenge we've recognized with CDPs tends to be a bit of an attempt at a one-size-fits-all. And this, the proverbial sort of boil the ocean, which then becomes a multi-year project that is often interminable and never really realizes the kind of value that we'd like to see. So what we also ask clients very often is not just to put forward this plethora of use cases or this massive wish list, but also to arrive at some kind of ranking and define the top 1 or 2 use cases that can determine immediate value and that can sort of prove the success of this single customer view, this consolidation of data across multiple use cases or multiple sources, and then work further from there.
I mean, you've segued really neatly into my next question, Prajal. It's almost like you knew this was coming. So our kind of last big discussion topic for today, before we move on to our audience questions, is what are those considerations when choosing a CDP? There are a lot out there, as we all know. So again, Sandy, I'm going to come to you, considering you must be advising people on this kind of stuff day in, day out. What's your advice to somebody who might be looking for a CDP?
Thanks, Hannah. And Prajal, you absolutely kind of kicked off some of that thinking as well. And to me, even before diving straight into looking at the CDPs themselves and assessing the ones that are actually out there, I think it's really important, a very top line, to consider the business goals, the vision and the goals that you're actually looking to achieve, and to set that scene and to do that, to build those foundations around identifying, okay, towards getting to those goals, what are the pain points and the gaps, along with what are those user cases. And you've already touched on not just having a whole long wish list of user cases, but actually prioritizing them and ranking them based on building a proper roadmap based on prioritization as well. And at the same time, you should also be considering, okay, what technology and data do you have at the moment? So what is the current as is, and where do we want to get to? What should that look like? And if you are thinking about a CDP, how will it actually work with the rest of your tech stack? And where will it sit in your overall ecosystem? And then when you're thinking about a CDP, really ask yourselves the questions around how will it actually help you access and manage your data? Will it really solve those problems and pain points that you've identified, but also will it really accelerate your speed to be able to unlock your vision and your goals as well. And then Prajal, you've already touched on kind of the organizational readiness as well. I think this is really, really key, because the CDP, onboarding a CDP isn't just a quick one team journey. There's lots of teams involved that would actually feed into the requirements of what a CDP will deliver and how it will work, what needs to be ingested into the CDP. So internal collaboration is absolutely key, along with actually the governance around how the platform will be managed once it's stood up and live, and what that operating model will look like. So thinking about that even ahead of actually jumping in and actually going and selecting a CDP is really key. But when you're looking at the CDPs themselves as well, not all of them are equal. So we, when we're working with our clients, we'll build on the foundations around helping that business, gathering those requirements and helping build those business cases as well. But we'll also develop a scoring mechanism that will be often right for the client that we're working with based on the requirements that have actually been gathered, and that will actually help then evaluate the CDPs and select the right one for them. And some of those considerations that feed into that scoring mechanism often tends to be around the integrations and the number of integrations that are required, and how the integrations are actually going to be developed with the key media partners, for example. The different ingestion methods that the platform actually allows, the CDP platform allows you to actually undertake, to be able to standardize and normalize the data, as well as how a CDP can actually stitch different IDs together. We'll consider the modeling capabilities as well. Some clients, like their requirements would be to actually do modeling within a platform itself. Other clients would actually want to do the modeling outside of the CDP platform, but have the ability to be able to suck in the outputs of those models and those scores to activate against. And then there's also analytics around what types of insights can a CDP enable one to generate, what types of reporting is available, and how can that connect with other reporting and visualization tools, for instance. And then crucially, the segmentation, because ultimately a CDP is going to be is the engine for segmentation, and building those audiences to then pass on for activation across the different platforms. So there's lots to consider when actually thinking about a CDP, and scoring some of those considerations based on what's right for you and your business is absolutely key as well.
Prajal, anything to add on that?
The only dimension I will add there, Sandy, is how is in our experience how sort of multi-dimensional or multi-pronged the CDP selection or procurement process tends to be. Of course, you know, the marketing as the holder of the budget and the owner of the project tends to be the central procurement function or team. But given the emphasis on personal customer data and often the consolidation of data across multiple silos, very quickly the legal and the privacy teams get involved, equally the CIO or the CTO or the CDO organization. And that's where we often find that, you know, marketers have grand plans, but are unable to realize these plans because they're hamstrung by all these technical constraints around compliance and such. And I know it's a bit self-serving, but that's exactly why, as a European CDP, we've chosen to double down in this particular area, is because we find that increasingly this is where a lot of other platforms fall short, where, you know, you can do a lot of great stuff with data, but in today's environment and looking at the regulatory environment and the way it's developing in the future, and not just the regulatory environment, but also the sentiment around how companies engage with their customers and respect their preferences, it's critical for the underlying platform, one that is as sort of formative as a CDP, to ensure that it reflects these user consent and preference flags and signals. And that's where you can, you know, get sign off from privacy and legal, get the approval of the CTO or the CIO's org, and then power ahead with the marketing use cases as imagined.
All right. Thank you, guys. I'm going to summarize some of this stuff really quickly, and then we'll have a few minutes to answer some of the questions that have been coming through. So just as a quick takeaway for our audience who have been dialing in today, here are 5 key steps to finding the right CDP for you. It's going to be recapping on some of what's been discussed today. First thing is assembling that buying team. So exactly as Prajol was saying, you are going to have multiple different stakeholders who need to be brought into this CDP project, not least those owners of the different data silos across the business, but also those key stakeholders like legal and your DPO. So sooner rather than later. And then point number 2, as both of our speakers have discussed today in detail, is defining those challenges. A CDP is not necessarily a panacea, but it can do a great breadth of things. But trying to boil the ocean is not the way that you want to start. So identifying what those key problems are that you want to solve first is going to be the right step to not only achieving value, but being able to show it too. Number 3, knowing your integrations. The CDP is that new hub of the marketing tech stack, but it's only going to work if those integrations work. So understanding what those need to be from the get-go is going to make that process a great deal easier for you. Number 4, defining any other requirements you might have. You know, your challenges are first, your integrations are second, but there are probably more considerations that you have in terms of the kind of things that you want to do with that data, or the kind of insights and the kind of modeling that you want to be able to achieve. Thinking about those from the start will help you identify what kind of CDP you're really looking for. And finally, number 5, support considerations. As we probably gathered today, CDPs are bringing together a huge amount of different kinds of data and solving a very fundamental problem, which means that the onboarding of it can sometimes be relatively complex. And so sometimes you might need some extra support from whoever you're getting your CDP from in order to get it going, but also to keep working with it and getting value in the long term. Something that can differ for different businesses. So thinking about that from the start will, again, make sure that you've got the right solution for you. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking now, and I'm going to go over to questions from our beautiful audience that we've had coming through while we've been talking. We're going to try and take a couple. First question. Sandy, you touched on this a little bit, actually, but I want to go back to it. First question is about the cookieless future. So are CDPs going to be vulnerable with the deprecation of cookies, or is it something else entirely?
No, absolutely not. I don't think they're going to be vulnerable at all, because CDPs are working with the PII data, connecting actual real data together to build those customer profiles. They're not reliant on the cookie. So if anything, the CDP, as customers are focusing more on their first party data strategy, that really does increase that need for a CDP. Prajol, is there anything that you add up to that?
And no, if anything, the challenges around identification in the marketing space, starting with the deprecation of cookies, but also extending to some extent on mobile, given all that's going on now with Apple and others, has served as a bit of a tailwind for CDPs because of this renewed focus on first-party data, which extends to not just the traditional online or digital channels, but the offline channels as well, and how all of these can be consolidated to a single customer view and platform. We, of course, as Zeotap, and given our footprint in Europe, we have a potential solution for the cookieless future in ID+, and that's probably the topic of a separate conversation altogether. But as far as CDPs go, I think all the tectonic shifts around marketing identification, which then raise questions around measurement and attribution and other such important factors, will all play very much in the favor of CDPs.
100%. And actually, I'm going to go straight to another question, kind of off the back of that answer, which is, what's the future of CDPs? Where are they going next?
I would say they are evolving as the MarTech we touched on the MarTech landscape and how complex and fragmented it is. I actually think a CDP has that opportunity to to be that central brain, for example, of data and insights. And if anything, the capabilities of a CDP will evolve and adapt based on the changing market and the changing requirements and changing consumer behaviors and expectations as well.
I echo that completely. In fact, going back to something I said earlier, if you look at the evolution of the CRM and how it was and still is a system of record for sales, but touches almost every function in an organization, you could now look at the evolution of CDPs as taking sort of a page out of the CRM book, and the CDPs as a system of record for marketing, also touching almost every function in an organization.
Thanks, guys. One final question, because I think we're about to run out of time, unfortunately, and there are many more. So we'll see if we can address any questions that we don't answer offline later on. So we've already discussed the kind of CRM and CDP interaction and how they complement each other. But one of the questions that we've had is about DMP and CDP. So how do these two different types of tool either, usurp one another, or are they complementary? And if someone already has a DMP in place, should they be looking to get a CDP on board instead or alongside?
So we're actually seeing a bit of both, in fairness. So we were actually working with clients that have actually already got a DMP and a CDP, working in collaboration together. And it's actually the integration across the two to still streamline some of those data processes and make those data and assets available across the different platforms that they need to be leveraged and activated against. What I would say, though, is the future round, we are also seeing a lot of clients that may have a DMP and they're thinking about moving over to a CDP. And that's a slightly different journey that they're going on. And again, that whole exercise it really is about diving into what are their user cases, what type of data assets have they got enough data in the first place? Do they need to focus on continually collecting more data, for instance? So it really does depend on the individual use cases.
Yeah, I think DMPs and to some extent tag management solutions as well are sort of an artifact of a previous era in marketing and MarTech specifically. And to echo what Sandy said, they still hold a lot of residual value today because they power very critical use cases within the marketing function. But if I look especially at the evolution of the DMPs, my sense is, from reading the tea leaves almost, that CDPs will subsume DMPs going forward. There is a case today to be made for both to exist in tandem alongside each other, but increasingly CDPs as the more holistic platforms that extend not just to the online or digital identifiers, but across offline and online sources and the corresponding identifiers will grow their umbrella of capabilities to include a lot of what the DMPs do today. And the same is probably true of tag management as well, where increasingly as cookies are deprecated, there is less of a case to be made for a dedicated tag management solution, and somewhere between the consent management platforms and the CDPs, tag management will get sort of obfuscated. But I suppose that's something for the future and a development over the next 2 or 3 years.
And probably another webinar as well. So I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. So it's gone very, very quickly. Just before we close up, one quick thing for our listeners, our viewers. So in follow-up to today's event, you are going to be receiving a tasty bonus. So we have recently published the Enterprise Marketer's Guide to CDPs, and you are going to be receiving a copy of that in your inbox over the next 24 hours. It contains a lot of what we've discussed today and then some. So giving you an introduction to the world of CDPs as a whole, but also helping give you some guidance as to finding your right place in it. So we hope you find it useful. We hope you find it interesting. just as we hope you found today useful and interesting. So a big thank you, first of all, to both of our speakers. Sandy, Prajol, thank you for joining us today and for all of your insights. And thank you to everyone for having joined us. So we hope you found it very useful and illuminating. Enjoy the recording, and hopefully we will see you next time. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Goodbye.